Welcome to this very special edition of the KJ Masterclass Live, the show which ensures that you profit from your time spent here with experts, either through their insights, information, or simply learning from them. And today we have Tynan Grierson. He is the creator of Story Ark. Welcome to the show, Tynan.
Thank you, Ajay. Nice to see you. Nice to meet you. Nice to be here.
Same here, Tynan. And we'll be talking about stories, spirituality, and memories. You know, as journalists, we talk always about stories. As
Sure.
branding experts, we talk about stories, how to tell your story. But here, it is about a very different kind of story, many stories, and those that connect with many memories. So we'll be talking about stories this time, stories, spirituality, and memories, and
Yeah.
we'll talk about the creator arc, the story arc. So
Yeah.
first, to understand from you, Tynan,
Yeah.
help us understand what exactly is the story arc.
So, in a nutshell, it's a service that I started, as it happens, a little while before the pandemic, but it had been uh, kind of just rattling around in my head for such a long time that it's a service that records the voices and stories of those loved ones, be it a parent, a grandparent, a mentor. Doesn't have to be somebody that's blood relation that was so dear to you, and then that's that audio, because though we're communicating by video now, that I worked in radio before this. I have a background in my even my family. My dad worked in radio. My family worked in radio before that, and I always knew that audio, though video is universal, like it can cross cultural boundaries, it can cross language barriers, as we know. Just imagery can transcend those obstacles so that people can be understood. Video can do that, but audio is intimate. It's personal. It lives inside you. It's if you have the voice of a loved one in your head, it's more intimate in a way that is unique to audio. And I'm sure that this show likewise goes out to people and they sit with it and have these voices, that your voice, Ajay, and mine, that kind of sit in them, in their head and with their earbuds in or whatever they're doing. But the Story Ark is a service whereby we record and collect these voices of, again, a loved one, a parent, a grandparent, a whomever it might be, before they're gone, because those voices, as I said, are the most intimate portal to our connection to that person and to being known by them, or rather knowing them. As I said, started it before the pandemic, and I wouldn't have known. My father, he got sick in and around the time of the pandemic as well, and it was already an idea that I thought, this is this is a meaningful idea to me, so I'm going to pursue it. And he didn't get sick with COVID. He had a degenerative brain disease, and the degenerative brain disease meant that, as it is for a lot of people, it meant that his stories were gone before even he was. The man was still there, but the stories and that kind of that portal to those aspects of him weren't there anymore. And luckily I got his voice and his stories before he had gone as well. But all the way through, and even in the pandemic, I just kept getting signals that this was a meaningful task, because the pandemic, even more so, just kept verifying, kept kind of reifying that this was, as people were getting confronted with the loss of loved ones left and right, that this was a meaningful task. So the Story Ark is, as I said, in a nutshell, it's a service for recording and collecting the voices of loved ones. And, it's been going for a few years now. Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. And what do you do with those stories? It's a service for others also, if I understand?
Yeah, so basically, we have this, it's a book that the story kind of sits in, that can sit on someone's shelf. It becomes this very beautifully made. We made them, handcrafted these books that have this little compartment inside, and it sits on someone's shelf whenever they need it. But given that it's digital as well, that's both a physical manifestation of it, and then the story goes to, the if the son, the daughter, the grandchildren, all of these people, so that down the road they can have access to these things that, you know, very often, like when my dad passed, which he did just about a year ago, you end up with mementos, right? I have a pair of his cowboy boots, and I have, his money clip that he always used, and all of that. But those mementos are just that. They're inert. And without the story or something that animates it, which is to say his voice, forget the cowboy boot necessarily, but just telling some story, that is a memory. That taps you into something very kind of explicit and real. So the family member to whom it's the most important kind of connection, the family member is the person that really it's for down the road. It's their keepsake, and their kind of way of holding on to, that loved one.
Absolutely, absolutely. What do you want to achieve out of this, Tynan? I want to understand your feelings, and
Yeah.
and is it because of your loss, or is it
No.
because you? How do you explain that deep feeling about this whole
Yeah.
service?
So I mean, so I had a friend who, when she lost both her parents in a car accident, and when she did, in this day and age where we have all this all this digital access and constant access to people, even in far flung places, but she was looking through her phone frantically. She was manic to find this one voicemail. It was maybe like a 10, 15-second clip of her mom saying that one thing, that little expression she always used to say. And it was this kind of crystallization for me of like, that is what connection was for her. This kind of idea that like all the, as I said, the keepsakes, the mementos that she had from her parents, they didn't measure up to just this one piece of audio, this one clip. And all the way through, I had another friend who his dad died suddenly, and he was like, "Well, my kids, my two young boys, will never get to hear their dad's voice now, and hear him tell the story." He was a great storyteller, and some people are. Some people are predisposed to having that, like my dad was, or like some people's grandparents or parents or whatever. We all have that one where we're like, "Oh, he's a great," or he has this life lived, and like a jukebox, we cue them up and we're like, "Oh, B6, tell that story of when you met my mom, or tell that story of when you were in the war." And I think why this is so meaningful to me is because, in the face of what was already afoot, I didn't know at the time when I created it that I was about to lose my dad. But in the face of loss for all kinds of my friends, it struck me as a meaningful contribution. I was working in radio and making very good money, and it was advertisers and all the rest. But this had a tether of meaning that as much as I appreciated and was glad for that career path, this is one that has meaning and purpose embedded into it for me. And if I can give someone the gift of a tether of their family, of having, that voice that can't be taken from them, then it strikes me as something worth doing.
Right, right. You say that whatever we have in terms of things,
Yeah,
it's a memento and not a memory.
yeah,
Why people hang on to those things,
yeah.
and they think they are remembering the gone in as best manner as possible. So help us understand the difference. Second thing is,
Hmm.
Tynan, is that your effort is helping for the generations to come.
Yeah,
But many a times,
yep,
while living, we do not pay attention to create enough memories for ourselves.
Exactly
And
right.
that's a sad thing. What would you like to tell people that instead of making Tynan come later on and record something for your memory, why don't you create enough memories in your own lifetime when all is very good, when everything is so happy?
First of all, I could not, Jay, you kind of hit the nail on the head with something that very often happens, which is that you get, whilst living, this grandparent, this elder that is there, and while they're there, the grandchildren have no interest in hanging out with them, in hearing their stories, and being regaled, and wouldn't know the degree of comfort that comes from that. Like, very often what we want is, a wise or comforting elder at some point in our lives to kind of put our proverbial arm around our shoulder and kind of tell us that, that they have lived a long life, they've seen many difficult things and lived through them and come through it like not hardened and embittered. And that's what comes, I find, from when it's done right, this service. But what you were saying before, which as I said, I think is such a perfect crystallization. I've had instances where families come to me and they're like, I want this for my grandchildren. And the grandparent themselves is like, but these grandkids don't come visit. They don't care about me. And it starts to feel like, I don't know if you have this over there, where like some grandkids will like, it starts to feel like they're coming through the house and they're like putting a post-it note on like, oh, I want this lamp when you leave. And I put a post-it note, I'll take this when you leave. It's like they're trying to grab all the things before you're gone with no regard for you whilst you're here. And it takes, well, I mean, usually the kind of perspective that only an elder, that only a grandparent can have to see past that. But even then, it's very hard for someone who is an elder who's living with this host of wisdom and all of these things that they want to share and they want that connection, and yet still, very often, they aren't seeing the grandchild in the time. They aren't even seeing the kid, their child, in this moment. At least in the West, certainly, we shunt our elders and our older people away. They're sequestered away in like an old age home or in a space. And in COVID, that came home to roost because people couldn't even visit their elder, their mother, their father, their grandparent, whomever, and then they would die very tragically without being able to contact them. I agree. The earnest plea should be that it's both. That you should go and see these people and seek them out whilst they're here. And what that will make clear to you is that these things, including these voices, it will be as important to you as I think it can be down the road. It will be made clear why it's important to you to have these voices down the road. But very often, you hit it. Like, it's tragic that people, whilst their parent or grandparent is living, don't go and cultivate these connections. They put them away in a space and they're like, I'll come visit you on, holiday or what have you. That's maybe more endemic to the West than it is to the to the East but I certainly notice it here, and it's hard. It's hard for a lot of the elders to stomach and then to turn around and be giving, be open with all of this stuff that they have to share. They're like, well, pardon my language, but kind of, forget you. Where were you whilst I was still here, or I am still here, but you want to come in here and take the nuggets of wisdom before I leave? Yeah, so it's absolutely right. I think the answer is to do both. The answer is to go and see them whilst they're here, and cultivate this connection, and listen and heed what wisdom they have to share in the ways that can comfort you, and then also to find that you will seek or want more of that, because once you have had a taste for someone who has lived a life and not been embittered or hardened by it, but still kind of wants to share, that's something you want more of.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
Even if someone does not have the biggest amount of wisdom, at least they want to be heard. And those
That's it.
elders.
That is it. That is the crux of it is like, sometimes I use the word seen, like people want to be seen. People want to be seen and heard, but not necessarily, I don't mean that exclusively visually. I mean people
Yes,
want to be seen in
absolutely,
that truly deeper way. And
absolutely.
the only way that you can arrive at that is to give them that time and actually go to them. People want to be understood. It's so fundamental as a human want that it's almost indistinguishable from love. Just for somebody to understand and hear you and see you in a real deep way might actually just be love. I don't know what the distinction is to be made even.
Absolutely, absolutely. Audio is very intimate, Tynan. I can tell you. Even visual is visual is different. It
Sure.
can be good in terms of news. It can be good in terms of what we are talking. You
Sure.
can see, you can
Yeah,
feel.
yeah.
But for someone, you see, memories when we talk, my understanding is, Tynan, that whoever, if you want to remember, even if you have done the same thing while you were talking in real life,
Yep.
actually it's their voice that rings into your ears and the visuals are gone most of the time.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
is, that's what I feel. I
That
don't know how you feel about this, but I guess this is how we are made. This is what memories are. This is what about things are. This is what about people is, isn't it?
I think Ajay, it's exactly right. There is something that is more kind of fundamental and elemental about how we hear a voice versus how we see a visual. And memories get clouded, and your memory and my memory of even the same event is different, and all of these things are very muddy. But the way that we relate to a voice or something that, as you said, as we're recollecting something, you know, there might be a visual cue here or there that we'll remember, but we'll really remember the voice of someone that rings in our ear that is like when we're searching for it, and in this case it's the service I'm trying to provide, that when we're searching for it, it's like, what is that thing that they always used to say? And it lives inside us as opposed to external. Like our vision is a projection of the external world. Audio is intimate in that way that it lives in me and in you and in all of us, in our heads and hearts. So it's more intimate in ways that frankly video can't touch.
Absolutely, absolutely, Tynan. And so let's talk about stories and spirituality, what
Sure.
the connection is, especially, when we you bring that whole idea of recording their audio
Yep.
and they know that it's going to be for their memory. So a person knows that, we all know that someday has to be our end day
Yep.
and we will not be here in this form.
Yeah.
But when somebody comes and talks to you about it,
Yep.
it's almost like preparation of that ritual.
Yeah.
And
Very
and
much.
and it is for some people who have no regrets or who look life in a much more spiritual manner
Yep.
may find it just very normal,
Yep.
but a lot of people may not find it. It can be a bit of a jolt, even if they know that it's the eventual truth of our existence on this planet.
Yep.
How do you see this part, and how do people react normally when you get down to recording, because that is actually almost like that countdown for
Yeah,
many.
well, I mean, first of all, Ajay, once again, bang on the nail on the head. That is maybe the greatest kind of reconciliation that people, when they come and do this, have to make. And as you said, like, there are those who they have reconciled themselves to it on some level, and they're able to give with the notion that, especially to know that it's for generations hence, they have some sense that yes, though I am in a long line of people, I am here to kind of like be a link in a chain, and that this will move through to subsequent generations, to the grandchildren that I have met, to generations hence that I have not yet met. But those who have not yet dealt with it, And, we know the practices, and you could kind of try to foist upon people like, this is good for you to have to even entertain the idea that one day you won't be here. Memento mori, that classic kind of spiritual practice of looking at our own death. But once again, I can only speak for those in the West. There's a lot of people that get real squirrely when you talk to them about their death, or at least make them have to reconcile their own death. And yet, that's both the difficulty, but also where the jewels lie for them as they go through this process as well. Because I think my experience has been the obstacles for people when they're sharing their stories are shame, principally shame, when it comes to, have I lived a life, forgetting that it will end, but have I lived a life that when I sadly, or whether I should or not, when I try to compare it to others, has it been this big romantic, has it been everything that I feel it should be? That's one of the main obstacles. And then the other one is what we were just talking about, which is just that reckoning with death. And yet, for a great many people, part of the process, and what I end up talking to people about a lot is, if you actually can reconcile this, then it can inform and enrich the ways in which, now that you have marked this idea that you will, both how are you thinking about making sure that you are, beyond these stories, and particularly these stories, leaving more for the people that you are connected to? How can you make sure that you, in so much as you can control it, are actually heeding and feeding these connections yourself? Because those are the tethers, not just to life whilst you're still living it, but to life beyond you. Because we live on, these stories will live on, we live on, in our connection to and our love in others. That is fundamentally it. And I think that when I have dealt with people who have a great deal of difficulty reconciling it, some, by the way, and God bless them, some, it might be an obstacle that they can't get past, and so they won't want to record it. And more's the pity for that grandchild if they have it, that child, whomever. But there are some that death is so, we so in the West don't want to deal with it. Even in the face of something like we just lived with COVID, where everybody knows the reality, but it's something that, as opposed to, I've spent some time in India, when I was in Benares and Varanasi, and to see the relationship to death is to reckon with the fact that death is a part of this journey, but also it should not be hidden away. And the more that we come to find some measure of kind of reconciliation with that as a part of this journey, then we can, as I say, it enriches our now, our day-to-day, our relationships, and how much we're actually not squandering the time we have, to bring back to like your point of earlier of why are these kids, these grandkids, these whomever not taking advantage of this relationship whilst it's happening. So all of these things can be reconciled, but I can't force that on anybody. The same way I can't force anybody to be open-hearted or what have you. Open-heartedness is an invitation, as is this, but there are some people, and you hit it on the head, like there are some people for whom death is this thing that they don't want to acknowledge. But as I think you and I both know, I saw you nodding before, it's also such a potent, it can alchemize all of these other aspects of your life as far as how you enrich your relationships, your connection to others, all of that. And so that's embedded in this. And it's a challenge, but it's also why it's worthwhile, because it makes it even more worthwhile, not just for the grandkids, but for the person who's telling the story.
Right. So
Yeah.
generally, who comes with the request? Is it the grandchildren, or is it the grandparents, or the parents? Who comes for the request
It's
for
been a
this?
split, but certainly more often than not, it's the kids, which is to say, not even necessarily grandkids, but just those, the son, the daughter, the whomever who is thinking on behalf of. So the grandkid can't really see yet that they might want, and this would be a thing that they would treasure down the road. But generally, it's been a split. It's been like maybe 60-40 that a child will come and say, look, I want this for my kids or for myself of my parents. And then at other times, it will be that there are grandparents, parents, a person who isn't doesn't have children, but rather has a few mentors and a few people, and they feel, there's that, I have quotes all over my website or whatever, all about story, but like that famous Maya Angelou quote about like there's nothing so acutely difficult as dying with your story inside you, like dying with your story untold. There are some grandparents, or rather just people, who feel compelled to tell their story and have it shared. But I'd say, what at first was like far more children is now like starting to even out with some, elders wanting to share their story as well, because I think they see, well, that's their offering. Whatever comes of it, notwithstanding, that's the offering they can make with an open heart. But mostly it's a kid. It's a kid who wants like to have for themselves and for their grandchildren or however or whatever kids their kids might have. They want that voice for their family.
Right, Tynan. Right. One thing I wanted to understand for the
Sure.
audience is that these recordings,
Yeah.
though it may sound easy that recording is a recording, it can be a very difficult thing if I understand, because you also know that this is the person will continue to live for some more time or
Yep.
whatever time God gives
Oh
him
yeah.
or her,
Yeah.
but this is going to be what people in their family will remember. So you
Yep.
know that. Secondly, the person who is recording will record it with an idea, but that this is what their family will remember them as. So it can be quite tense
Yep.
if somebody tells me that this is going to be your last interview on earth. I would perhaps look at it very differently.
I I completely agree, Ajay, that like there's a first of all, it's like going into anything. It's like going into this recording with you or what have you. Like if I started to freeze up and think like, "Oh, I'm being recorded and as such I need to like be perfect and impeccable in my words and manage myself and my stories just so I would be stifling. I would freeze up. But also, like it's part of my job to put someone in a state where they feel open and feel that they can share without feeling that pressure. Because that's what you're describing. You're describing this overwhelming pressure to have this be their legacy, to have this be, and I don't think it is that. It can't be an end all be all legacy because the truth is there can't be every story that is ever told. That'd be an audiobook that might span in some people hours and hours if they wanted to tell every detail of their life story. And it can't be the sum total of everything that they were going to ever have done because, as you said very rightly, there's still more miles to go. There's still more life to be lived, whatever God or the universe might grant them. But I think, and likewise, there's even obstacles, or not obstacles, challenges that you haven't even kind of necessarily touched on, which are sometimes like the story that the kid has in their head of this is how this story goes, or these are the details that are in this story. Sometimes that's different than the way that that other person remembers it, so they don't quite line up exactly. And I think if you go in with that kind of pressure of I have to tell the story perfectly and I have to sum up my life exactly because this is my grand legacy, I think that person will either freeze and stammer and be at a loss for words, or just decide that that it's too hard, that they don't want to do it. And I think therein lies my work, which is to put somebody at their ease so that I'm making clear to them that, like, we're just having a, kind of a share and a storytelling and a recording, and that just like, each time you tell a story, it might change ever so slightly. There might be imperfections in it, but that's why story is a living thing. That's why story is organic. That's why when you tell a story and I tell a story, though they might be the same story, it will have slight deviations in it because you bring you to the story and I bring me to the story. And all I want actually is beyond the story itself. I want the part where you bring you to it. I want you in there. And when you do that, when you embed that in there, as I try to impress to anybody, to not be so burdened by getting things perfect, when you bring yourself to it, just in the telling of it, then that's the gift that you're giving to that person. The legacy isn't the perfection of the story. The legacy is that they get some sense of you and who you are. That's it, really.
My last question to you,
Yeah.
Tynan, is that that for those people who are telling their story, it is just their story.
Yep.
For you, it is one more story. With so many stories,
Yep.
people are not just, whatever their relationship with their own family, but with you, it is almost like the relationship of trust.
Yes.
In a way, they are making confessions of their whole
Yep.
life in front
Yep.
of you without that being enumerated in
Yep.
words.
Yep.
How do you take those stories, hear those stories, deal with their stories,
Yeah.
knowing that you are holding that whole, almost like preserving it like Noah's Ark, and keeping it safe for.
Well, I mean, I definitely try to take out the religious connotations, even though the logo, as you can see over my shoulder, other shoulder, is very ark-like, and the ark is in there. Like, once again, you hit it, and it's a beautiful question that, like, there is a sacred trust in giving someone this story, and I take that quite seriously. But also, I find I am always trying to impress. So you were saying, like, who hires me, and very often it might be the child or the son or the daughter. But before this is for anyone, this is for that person giving the story. It is their story, and as such, when the physical manifestation of it, the book with the story, comes to them, it is for them first before anyone. So the sacred trust, like, very often, like, I've had many instances where I feel more like a therapist or a priest or a confessor or some kind of, person who is kind of a therapist is the best way to put it. Somebody who is taking this crazily intimate and trusting piece from this person, and beyond my kind of the sincere, earnest kind of attempts to foster this trust with this person, the trust is that this is yours first and foremost. Even if the son or daughter might have hired me, it is your story, and as such, it is for you to give to them when and if you feel it is right. They can record your story and ask for it, but in the same way that grandkid, the metaphor I used of the grandchildren coming around and placing post-it notes on the lamps and on the furniture, like, those things are yours. You will give them as you see fit. This story is yours, and it is for you to give as you see fit. So, like, that sacred trust has to be kind of the loop. That sacred trust loop has to be closed by my impressing upon them that this is yours before it's anyone else's. And when you feel good about giving it, that is for you to give. And that's true of just the storytelling itself, because I can only get what somebody is willing to give. As I said about being open-hearted, like, I can only, like Hanuman, like, exposing their heart. I can only give what, I gave you a little Hanuman nugget. I can only give what somebody's willing to share. I can only get what somebody's willing to give, I should say, forgive me. But also that, that sacred loop, that trust, that is embedded in that. That's kind of like, it is your story. And as such, it has to be yours first and foremost.
Absolutely, absolutely, Tynan. So, people who want to know more about you, Tynan, what is the best way for them to connect with you?
So, I have,
People who want to tell their stories, what is the best way for them to connect with
yeah, I have a website. It is so you can read the story arc over my shoulder, but it's the Story Ark, ARK, thestoryark.ca, and there's an about me page or the story of me page on that website. But also that's the best method for contacting me. It's all through there. My own email, Tynan at thestoryark.ca is the best way to kind of just get directly in touch with me. And that's the best way to kind of like either get in contact and we can have a chat to see if this might be right for you, or just set up booking, directly. So that's the way. Thestoryark.ca.
On this note, it's a wrap on this very special edition of the KJ Masterclass Live. Thank you so much indeed for joining us.
Thank you, AJ.